How do we go forward? We hope the film will do that. I mean, speaking for myself, I hope the film will do that. I hope we'll ask ourselves now, instead of, our friends and being on Facebook and things like that, to make decisions, think about where we're getting the information from. I remember when Tessa, our first child, was born, and I had parents that I loved telling me, you don't need to use all the vaccines. Thankfully, we also went and talked to people that we loved who are doctors and got the result, and we got the vaccine. So it's take your time in getting results, and question all of these things. Question the things in the movie 5 years from now. We have to. It's an iterative process. Neil, you got anything more for us? Help us, please.
Yeah, sure. First, it's great seeing. I narrated the film over the video clips as they appeared in front of me in the studio, and so these people are actually real. Like, I can touch them, They're like flesh and blood, real people. So it's great to see that we can bring them in for this. I think if people knew how to think about and understand and process information and data, this film wouldn't even be necessary. So this is a piece. This has to remedy a symptom of a much deeper problem. And I think the simplest way I can say this is consider that there are 3 kinds of truths. I used to think there was only one kind of truth, but then you argue with people who are sure about their truth. So I said, all right, let me give them their truths. And then bin them into 3 kinds of truths. And this pretty much covers them all, I think. So I've thought about this. One kind of truth is, you might call a personal truth. This is true for you personally, whether or not it's true for anyone else. Is Jesus your Savior? Is Muhammad the last prophet on earth? These are your personal truths. Typically, to convince others of your personal truth, it requires some form of persuasion, and in the limit, it can even require violence. That's how you get the Crusades and other things, to convince someone else of your personal truth. There's another truth. I'll call it a sort of cultural political truth. These are truths that get established simply by repeating them, with or without regard to any absolute verification of what is stated. So we all know Hillary's first name. Her first name is Crooked, okay? It's Crooked Hillary. That got repeated, okay? So you can establish truths simply by repeating them, and they become a cultural political truth. The third kind of truth is one that is a truth that exists outside of yourself. It is an objective truth. As the little bit of me in the film from Bill Maher, it's science is true. When I say science, that's you have to unpack that sentence. Science is true whether or not you believe in it. I'm referring to not science as anything that science does. I'm referring to emergent, verifiable results. That is the science I referred to in that brief clip.
The scientific process.
The scientific method. And the scientific method, as was stated in the film, if he gets a result, that is not established as true until other people can verify this result. That's not how the media does it, though. The media finds your result, and it's kind of interesting and a little bit controversial. That becomes the headline. And if he's on the frontier of research, somebody else might find a different result. And these different results are bouncing around, and then leaves you to think that scientists don't know what the hell they're doing. On the bleeding edge of scientific research, information goes back and forth all the time. It's when there's an emergent, repeated result. That's when you establish a scientific truth. And those truths are objective truths, and they are true no matter your personal belief system, no matter where you were born, and that is the kind of truth that people should base legislation on and laws.
Decisions about their children.
Anything that affects everybody in a pluralistic society, if you're going to pass a law, that's the kind of foundation it should be based on. Without it, you are fomenting if you start basing laws that are not anchored in objective truths, it is the beginning of the end of an informed democracy.
Can I please follow that up with, Neil, how do these people tell the difference?
I'm trying!
When they go back, I know. When they go
What more do you want me to do?
Wait, but Neil.
I did Cosmos. I did, you know.
We want more.
Help them up, people. Help them up. You're doing great work, Neil. We love you. But Neil, you sent me an email just yesterday saying this guy might come back at me again, and that was Jeffrey Smith. Jeffrey Smith had the nerve to come after you and try and say that he had science too. So how do we tell the difference? How do we smell the difference between Jeffrey Smith and Neil deGrasse Tyson?
So what you need to do is be able to ask questions in the purest possible way. You don't come to a problem with a pre-existing sense of how it should be or how you want it to be. This is, I think, Bill Maher refers to being in the bubble as his sort of tool to argue against people who are stuck within. He's got his own bubble, by the way. I'm going to tell him that next time.
A few of us might have been in a bubble on Tuesday. Yeah.
People have bubbles. And what is a bubble? It's information that stays within the bubble that fulfills your confirmation bias. And any information you let in is consistent with what you want to be true in that bubble. And if it is not consistent, it doesn't even have access to the bubble. And if you are truly curious, you will care about all the information that's not in your bubble. I was asked, I don't want to hog the whole time, I want to hear, you got people here. I was asked by the New York Times in their book section, what's on your shelf? Okay, that's one of the things. What are you reading? And I said, well, I have an entire shelf on pseudoscience. I have another shelf on religion, all of the world's religion. I have another shelf on, and they said, why would you have books on that?
Get outside your bubble.
It's stuff that's outside the bubble. And I like knowing how people think, how they put information together, so that I can compare and contrast. So if all the books on your shelf are only stuff that already agrees with what you want to know, you are not growing, all right? You are become ossified in a perspective that does you and nobody and no one else any good at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Testify.
So I just have one other thing I want to say, and then I'll open it up to the floor to questions. But one of the things that struck me in the film that just moved me was this idea that when's the last time that I really changed my mind about anything? And so that I found quite, actually, it was provocative. And I thought about it, and I was like, you're right, why do I believe the things I believe? And so I guess I would ask you guys as scientists in particular, maybe you're the best one to discuss this, but this is part of your job, is to always question why it is you believe what you believe, right? How do we get everybody else to do that on a more regular basis, to sort of question themselves and sort of think about, I believe this because of X, Y, and Z, not just because I feel like I believe it.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think what we see is that the narratives that are pushed out there by fearmongers are often very compelling, whereas scientific facts and scientists generally are pretty boring. And so it's hard to get that message out there, and people have to push themselves, as Mark Linus alluded to get outside of their confirmation bias and actually look at other evidence. And you see, especially with social media, that it just gets so nasty so quickly when you suggest that maybe the data doesn't support someone's opinion. And so it's a really difficult thing, but I think it's so important for the science community to start speaking in human language to normal people, and that's hopefully what this movie does, to try to get that message out there and have people actually think about where are they getting their ideas from, and is it actually based on evidence, or is it a narrative they heard on Food Babe?
Right. Just a quick thing to add.
Please.
Scientists are humans too. So, so scientists have no less susceptibility to bias than anyone else in the culture. Right. So the methods and tools of science were conceived and developed to ferret out any kind of bias that could manifest. And it could, if it is later revealed that your results were the result of your own bias, that is a huge mark against your integrity as a scientist. So you want to make sure you've minimized it, but even if you can't or didn't, the system itself will find it, and it will not look good for you. So yes, we admit these biases, but
Confirmation bias is a bitch. It affects everybody. Tamar Haspel, another science journalist in the film, has a 2-question test for us civilians. So it's like, in the last year, has anyone in this room been wrong about something, anything, right? Like, raise your hand, say yes, right? Pretty much everyone's been wrong about something. What? Like, what exactly were you wrong about of substance? I dare you to figure that thing out. Because then your brain kicks in. Wow, no, I'm taking stock of all my opinions and my beliefs, and every single one of them is right. Therefore, I'm never wrong. Well, no, you are.
So, yes, please, of course.
On that same question, because of changing minds, you as a farmer, did you go through a journey of changing your mind about GMOs and the technology through the course of your work as a farmer?
Yes, I did. Smith, Jeffrey Smith, and all the other activists. There's a lot that goes on, and somehow you kind of believe the myth, but then along the way, when you live it, actually, when you go, it was like the transition I went through it's kind of science, it's still science, whereby you see it's evidence-based. So it's evidence-based science whereby you see actually this thing really works. GMOs are different. You know, people have this, you saw the rats? So, and then they say, you see, when you plant this kind of maize, the maize will turn out to be a snake or a rat, and then when you eat it, it will get into you. So those are the kind of myths that people have been going on.
That's real propaganda that you heard in
Yeah,
Africa.
yeah.
Wow.
Then along the way,
Thank you.
of course, as a scientist and as a farmer, and you know you really want to succeed, okay? And you look at this, the farmer in Joburg, he even cried, okay? The farmer in Uganda, that lady, she's I think called Francis? Yeah. So these people, if there's no science, and the problem with science, this is the problem with scientists, we don't know how to communicate. We do our figures, we do our research, we correlate, we do everything, and everything is superb. But passing it on to, we call them the lay people, but passing it on to the rest of the world is a little bit difficult. And even when we pass it on, you're like, there's a log likelihood that. So it's difficult, again, to get it out of science, to pass it on to people. So this movie or such productions are very good for people to understand. And I would encourage whoever out there to support whatever's going on so that the rest of the people can learn.
And amazing communicators like yourself, helping other farmers. Please, you say you're an incredible communicator, and look what you've done with the farmers in just your area.